And now this name, it has gone far and wide.
I started my first company when I was 13.
Ground zero, literally.
And I was thinking to myself, oh man, what shit have I gotten myself into?
Why in the car business? It's not necessarily deep tech or sexy.
The fundamental and most important thing, whenever I tell and speak with entrepreneurs, is
If you've ever wondered how one founder took on Southeast Asia's fragmented used car market, built a tech juggernaut from scratch, and rewrote the rules with data, grit, and vision, this is the episode you can't miss. Today, we go behind the hype with Aaron Tan, the unstoppable force behind Carro.
Carro.
This isn't just about the business, it's about Aaron, his bold bets, and the journey of building Carro into what it is today. Welcome to Asia Tech Lens' very first episode. This is Aaron Tan, co-founder and CEO at Carro. Welcome to the Asia Tech Lens podcast, where we speak to the people behind Asia's tech future. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. And congratulations on your latest closing of Series D with the Cool Japan Fund, which we'll talk about later on the show. But firstly, let me kick things start with a few rapid fire questions, okay? Let's make it fun and quick. First car you ever owned?
First car I ever known, Lexus.
Dream car you'd love to drive but never bought?
That must be a Lamborghini.
EV or petrol?
EVs for now.
Manual or auto?
Automatic. I'm too lazy.
Best road trip destination in Southeast Asia?
Southeast Asia, best road trip. I think that has to be, believe it or not, Malaysia.
Where in Malaysia?
Well, anywhere in Malaysia is fine. I think if you drive up all the way, from Singapore all the way up north to towards Langkawi, Kedah, I think it's a pretty good drive.
Now, we're going to start from the very beginning. You're kind of like the poster child of Singapore's rising tech scene, right? And there are a lot of media reports saying that you started to do business by selling, doing business, selling stuff at the age of 13. Tell us, what was the story? What were you doing back then?
I wasn't exactly selling stuff per se. I was definitely selling services though. I started my first company when I was 13. History has it that I incorporated my first company using my grandmother's name because I was underage at that point in time. But the first company actually was in the business of selling hosting, right? Web hosting itself, and what you guys would colloquially call cloud services, web services or AWS or whatever. Those days, back more than 20 years now, when I was 13, that was how I first started my business. Basically, selling, reselling, server racks, right? Web hosting spaces. And that was basically what I was doing when I was really young, when I was doing my secondary schools, when the kids were playing out there and stuff like that. I was busy running a business, basically selling, or for that matter, reselling the server spaces that I have. Because I got into this realization pretty early on in life that actually server cost was pretty expensive, and you would have cost you thousands of dollars per server racks those days. And if you split it to like 100 or 1,000 different people trying to share that cost in that sense, then it would have cost you like maybe, I don't know, anywhere from $5 to $10 a month. And that would have been the first business that I did back when I was 13.
So you were already a techie kid. You understand all these computer stuff back then from early on.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. So when I was 13, I was very lucky because by the time I was 12, my mom bought me a computer. I took it apart many times. I got the internet when I was 11 or 12, and I think the rest was history. So I think the main reason why I gotten so good at what I was doing was primarily um the software, whatever I was installing back then, kept crashing the computer. And so whenever it crashes, I need to reinstall the whole thing. I told myself, hey, this is it's very mundane, right? But after you do it like 100 times or so, you get pretty good at it. And then after you meddle around, you play around with all these servers and things like that, you realize that actually, you know what, you can make a business out of that. And that was the reason why I gotten a lot better what I was doing, because I just repeated that damn thing for like 100 times.
So
Way
did you
earlier
make
than most of the
money?
kids. Yeah, I did. I
So
made
did
quite
you,
a bit of money. Yeah,
and were you proud of yourself?
I wouldn't say that I was very proud of myself and stuff like that. I think for lack of a better word, when I was younger, quite before I was 21 and stuff like that, I think the word obnoxious is probably true, right? In that sense. So I would say that. I wouldn't say that I'm proud of myself, but I would say that I would have been pretty damn obnoxious in that sense, simply because I had money. I had, cards and stuff like that. I go to interesting
When you were
places when I was in my
teenager.
teens. Yeah. So from that
Uh,
standpoint, I think I had a fairly good and affluent, if you may, younger life when I was 13, right? So I mean, when in my teens, early teens in that sense.
did you tell your parents eventually after you make money, or you just shared it with your grandma, dear grandma?
No, my mom didn't care. Not that they didn't care in that sense, but my mom was extremely skeptical about making money via the internet at that point in time. This again, mind you, this was in the 90s, right? 19
Before the
late
Asia financial
1990s,
crisis.
early 2000s and stuff like that. During just about the time of the Asian financial crisis in that sense. That was when I
Mm,
first had my first company, and my mom was like, "Oh, what is this internet thing?" In fact, when I asked her for her credit card number, because those days that was the only way they could buy anything online. Um, she just basically didn't want to give it to me, but in the end, she relented. I think the rest was history. So I just didn't, go around to telling them and stuff like that. They did know that I was making money. After realizing that, I bought this, I bought that. When I was 18, I was driving already. So I think, needless to say, they know I was making money, but they didn't know how much money I was making.
okay. And did you share with your grandma? So grandma was always your supporter. Your grandma always supported you, whatever you wanted to
Yeah,
do.
I mean, to a certain extent, we do, right? Whenever there's a chance, I'll bring her out for dinner. Give her some money and stuff like that. So I think, I wouldn't say sharing per se, like a 50-50 kind of split. But
Hmm.
definitely there was a lot of gifts and birthday meetings, meals and stuff like that with
Hmm.
grandma. Yeah,
Is grandma still around? Is she so? She
yeah,
must be
she's
so
still.
proud of you, right? Right? She's like, see, I
Well,
told you, I saw something in this kid. You know, Chinese say
no,
3岁看到老, 是吗? So what that means is like, there's certain like once you're three, you can already see certain characteristics in
yeah.
a child that character makes destiny, right? So was grandma the one that saw
No,
something
I
in
mean, I would,
you?
no, I really don't think that was the case. But grandma was the one that was, quoting my mom at that point in time, an easy scapegoat in that sense. I think she was more worried about the fact that if she's a director in the company, she had liability and all the stuff like that. And whereas my grandma didn't have to worry about all those things. So she said, you know what, why don't you just use your grandma's name and then life is good. True story. Yeah. But anyway, it's nothing to do with what I just said, which is like, oh, grandma saw something and stuff like that. I wish that was the case, but yeah.
Okay. And then you went on to had you went to the US. You studied in the US. How that experience changed you?
Yeah, I think one of the most pivotal moments in my life was when I got the scholarship and I ended up studying in the United States. How did that change me? I think one of the first few things, and I did a lot of stuff when I was in the US, was that, we did all kinds of random stuff because the nature of American universities is like, it tends to be a lot more interdisciplinary. So I did, for instance, I learned robotics, I learned baking, I did golf, right? All those things that, even though I was in one of the best computer science schools in the world, I was actually spending half my time doing everything else other than computer science. So I think that was
Hmm.
very instrumental in the way I was thinking moving forward, right? And when I grow older in that sense. I did robotics when I was really young, so I had a very good idea of how to build, let's say, unmanned vehicles in that sense, right? Though not a
Mm.
skill that I use today much at all, but it
Hmm.
forms a lot of basis of my understanding of self-driving vehicles and all the stuff like that. So it just comes back in a lot of many ways in that sense. But on a more serious note, other than all these things that you learn in school, okay, actually when I was in school, I started a company there together with a professor, and so that was also extremely helpful. And through that, I met other folks when I was in Pittsburgh, who is very much involved in the business chamber of commerce and stuff like that. So I made quite a bit of money, number one, as a student when I was on site on campus and stuff like that. I met many very interesting professors till today. They're still very extremely influential scientists and professors in their own fields, be it in AI, be it in virtualization and stuff and whatnot. But I think I would say that the two key projects that I did when I was in CMU that actually shaped a lot of my understanding, my knowledge, and my future was basically the first one was the company that I did. It was basically an online education system, right? That we allow like hundreds of thousands of students to work together on a piece of literature, right? And that case study came from a English professor at that point in time, and called David Kaufman, And David basically said, look, I want to allow these thousands of students to come in and work on a single essay at any point in time, but there is no way I could do it. At least not at that point in time. There wasn't Zoom and
There's
stuff
no
like that. So
Google Drive.
I mean, there was also no Google Docs, Google Drive at that point in time, right? So, and even if there is, you cannot work on the same one and say that, okay, you know what, I'm reading this particular line, I can annotate this line and say that, hey, what do you think, right? Kind of stuff. And then after which, do a heat map, all those things. It's a very different use case from doing Google Docs, which is more productivity. And this one
Mm-hmm.
is really more about literature, understanding whether or not the student understands the literature well. But anyway, it's a tech company. So I think that was one of the very interesting things that I did. So we did that for a while. I was the first and only programmer at a point in time for this. So I wrote a whole stack of it. It turns out, it turned out well, became subsequently its own company, right? And I think that the company got fundamentally sold, if I'm not wrong, towards the end. But I don't know much after which anymore because I would have left CMU then, and then the company got sold subsequent to which, right? And the second one I thought was even more interesting was basically in the field of what I call virtualization. Now, virtualization, if you understand, basically is the fundamental building block of cloud computing, right? So the reason
Mm-hmm.
why we are able to do what we are doing right now in terms of I don't know, quite virtual machines and stuff and whatnot, is simply because of this hypervisor layer that abstracts the hardware from the software in that sense. So in other words, you're able to run any operating system on any hardware, right? You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to, because traditionally you have to run, say, Intel on x86 architecture hardware and stuff and whatnot. But virtualization, because it's a software defined layer in between, it sort
Mm-hmm.
of like matches all these things automatically for you so that you do not need to worry about the underlying OS. So in other words, you can run like 10 different OSs on one single virtual machine, or rather in
Okay.
one single bare metal server, right? So that was the
Mm.
fundamental research that I did. Again, this must have been more than 10, 15 years ago. In those days, it was still very early. But that formed also my fundamental understanding of this space in general, right? So when the opportunity comes to invest in, say, this particular company in the United States called Arista Networks, subsequent to me leaving Carnegie Mellon for like many years later, um, we saw this very interesting lady called Jay Shree, who was at that point in time trying to create this what we call a software-defined network for switches, or rather software-defined switches, not exactly SDN, but more like software-defined switches. Now, if you look at Arista share price today is in the tens of billions of dollars, right? So when we first invested, it was in the less than $1 billion. But I think what's more important is that you categorically can understand why everything in the server or networking system itself should be what we call software-defined, right? I'm just trying to draw parallels to you in that sense, but my
Mm.
early days studying in the
Mm.
United States, what has it got me, right? I mean, other than learning all this kind of nonsense ranging from like robotics to golf and baking, I learned a lot of other very very tangible stuff. And beyond the
Mm.
fact that a lot of my classmates are like the head of Google Brain, right, at the point in time, right, head of whatever
Mm.
quant funds and stuff like that. So it's a very good network as well that I brought on with me. So I think these
Mm.
three things I would say are three things that I really took away with me. A lot of nonsense, a lot of
Mm.
very tangible hard core tech style stuff that only Carnegie Mellon could provide, or MITs of the world, or
Mm.
and for that matter, the whole network of people that I have alongside me over the last 15 years after I left college.
Right, right. Wow. I'm a strong believer where you have been, the people you have met, all shaped who we are today, right? You mentioned that a little bit about your investment. So after that, you went on, you came back to Singapore. You came back to Singapore because you went on with a scholarship. So you have to serve within the government for a certain number of years, and there you started Singapore's like nascent startup ecosystem, basically, right? So I remember as a reporter, I covered the Block 71 back in 2011. Was it around then that Block 71 was
Yeah.
established, and were you part of that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, so that was my first project. So as a returning scholar back in 2010, I was very lucky because I had the luck of the draw in that sense. I met the CEO of the fund. She was basically nice enough to give me the job. Honestly, on the first meeting itself, right? So I got a job on the same day, and she asked, "When can you start?" And I said, "Anytime you want." Fast forward, I think that was probably one of the best decisions that I've made. Coming back to this. But as I entered the job, my first task was basically to set up Block 71. And you would imagine,
Oh, wow.
I would have drove to this particular. It's just for lack of a better description, what we call flattered factories, right? So it's an industrial estate in the middle of nowhere. There was no one north MRT was not even up at that point in time. So
Yep.
the nearest place I had beside me was Fusionopolis, which is a Starbucks beside it, and there was really nothing
Hmm.
beside it. It's like I said again, I stress, it's a flattered JDC, what they call the JDC flattered factories. That was basically what it was.
Hmm.
I went up there. I looked at it. I was like the only car in the car park lot, looking at seven, 8 floor. And then I was thinking to myself, "Oh man, what shit have I gotten myself into?" Anyhow, I went in there. It got worse because everything was falling apart. The roof was falling apart and stuff like that. And yeah, anyway, so I was told, this ground zero, and we had to actually get it started, right? And we don't care how you do
Yeah.
it, just go and figure it out. So, but needless to say, I think I was very lucky in that sense that again, at that point in time, I met Chen San, I met Dr. Lily Kong, Dr. Michael Yap, and stuff like that. And everybody came together, put their own resourcing in. I cannot claim credit for the setup of the entire Block 71. I think that is really a multi-agency, multi-institution kind of support. Of course, Singtel being one of the key anchor, I mean, being the key anchor tenant together with NUS Enterprise, together with the government, right? In this case, at that point in time, MDA, the tripartite came
IMDA.
together, and then we set this all up within the last, when I was there, the last 3 years and stuff like that. I think the I still remember at that point in time when we first got around, first told to do this, the project was named Ground Zero, right? So
Ground zero,
it was
literally.
Ground Zero. It
Yeah.
was a pretty bad name, but anyway, so um, after doing this for a few months, then suddenly became there was a meeting called and said, "Hey, you know what? What should we name this place?" And various people came out with various ideas. I should not name them because it's a bit shameful, but I think one of them came up with like one infinity loop. We need to copy what Apple has in that sense,
Oh, yeah.
Cupertino. I was like, that's interesting, but you know what? You're gonna call this building what infinity? I mean, that sounds a bit what's the word, common, right, in that sense. And then I went back and then I told the group, so maybe we just call this place Block 71, and we do not call it Block 71 because in the United States where I was studying, right, for the bulk of it, actually, if you think about this, people don't talk about block, right? So if you just go to Henry Street, you say I'm going to 4628 Henry Street. I will
Yeah.
not say I'm going to block 4628 Henry Street, right? And the other thing about the Americans, or for that matter, anybody else in the world, is that we do not abbreviate. Singaporeans love to abbreviate, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
so in Singapore's case, when we talk about block, it's not BLOCK, it's BLK. It's uniquely Singapore, right? Everything is,
Yeah.
is bloody abbreviated. So that's the
Yeah.
other thing. And the other thing is also I wanted to encompass this density, this small, bright spot ecosystem kind of stuff. Nothing embodies that kind of what's the word? Um the kind of spirit more than a building itself, a block itself, right? In that sense, it was dense, it's small, it's very
It's a
unique to Singapore.
community.
This HDB
Yeah.
is a community, right? So,
Yeah.
so when I thought about this, I said we should just call this place BLK Block 71, and that's it, right? So I think on that
Ah.
note, I think that was the story that I gave them. I went back and registered the whole domain block71.org or .com, I can't remember, and
So the
yeah, the
name
rest
you
was
can
history.
take
Yeah.
credit. So the
No, for
name
sure,
you
I have
can
to
take
I have to
credit.
take credit for that, right? So I
Ah,
was the one who came up
excellent.
with that name. And I think at the end of the
Excellent.
day, I registered that domain, right? So I think
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
that, right? And
And
subsequent
and
to
have you
which, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, and now this name it has gone far and wide. It has the office in San Francisco, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I was also the one who set up the San Francisco office. That was prior to me leaving civil service in that sense. And so I left. Uh, so the good thing again, having joined the fund was that they after I performed relatively well, I guess, in Singapore and in other places, they decided that, hey, you know what, maybe we should send you off to the US office. So again, when I was there, I realized that there was this issue, right, whereby Singaporeans going to the United States or Americans trying to get into Southeast Asia, they do not know actually where to go, right? So if they do not know where to go, that's an issue. So we wanted to create this Block 71 thing whereby Dr. Lee at the point in time was calling it Launchpad. And again, I was again, as I said, I was very lucky because I was an IDA scholar, right? So when I was there, I was asking the Infocom Development Authority what is exactly the problem. At the point in time, my buddy there, Yao Shin, is telling me that this is a problem. And all these Singaporeans trying to come here, they don't know where to start to get going. All these Americans trying to get to Singapore, they actually do not know where to get going. So we need a launch pad like this. And to which I said,
Mm.
you know what? Why don't we set up blocks in one in San Francisco and we do it properly? And so I caught up my boss at that point in time, Edgar, and the rest was history, right? He caught up Dr. Lily, and then she thought it was a great idea. And I think we then decided that, okay, maybe what? the next stop, like Block 71, US, San Francisco in that sense. And I quickly got
Mm-hmm.
involved with, the setup of whole place as usual, right? Down to the bob, where's the location, the rental, the agreements and stuff and whatnot. We effectively landed at a very nice place, which is beside General Assembly, at 4th King Street. So, that was where the first variation of Block 21 was, and lasted for a few years because rental was too expensive there then. So I think
Mm-hmm.
after a few years after my departure, they shifted to another place, which I do not know where exactly they are. But otherwise, yes,
Mm-hmm.
I was very much involved in the whole Block 21 setup.
And then after you were free, you decided to go back to what you have been doing since young and you're good at is to run a business. And Carro means car hero. Why in the car business? It's not necessarily deep tech or sexy.
Yeah, you're right. It's not necessarily deep tech or not sexy. My dad, in fact, asked me this question: why do you want to sell cars? In fact, my dad once told me there's a few groups of people that you do not trust, right? The top three categories, um, and of course
Insurance guy.
the lawyers and the politicians are up there. But
Okay.
the number three or number two guy, which is not far away, would be the car salesman, the used car salesman specifically, not even the
Yeah.
new car salesman. And not exactly the industry that inspires the most trust. But for me, it was very straightforward. The way I look at life was that how do I look at adjacencies in the business that could have a long tail in that sense? And at
Mm-hmm.
being a VC for like 5 or 6 years in my life, it was very clear I need to look for a few important outcomes, or rather few characteristics when it comes to running a business, especially a venture-backed one. Not all businesses are the same, but in venture-backed businesses, I do think that number one, scale. Size
Mm-hmm.
is super important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Scalability, which is the ability for you to scale, replicate the business, or replicability is also super important. And
Mm-hmm.
what I would call long tail, right, or LTV, or for that matter, ecosystem, right, in that sense, would be super important. Now, if you look at this, automotive itself, $1 trillion vertical, no questions, check that box, right? So it's big business. Replicable, we look at competition across the board in Southeast Asia at that point in time, 8 years, 9 years ago. There wasn't really any tech-enabled online dealership platforms in that sense. What we had at that point in time were mostly classifieds. So, it is what it is. We didn't think classified as a competitor. They
Oh,
do
there was
think some of them do,
Craigslist,
yeah.
right? Back
Yeah.
then, there was
Craigslist, yeah,
Craigslist.
but Craigslist is what we call a classified, right? So we don't exactly
Mm,
compete with classifieds that way. We use them, we work with them. In fact, we advertise, we spend a lot of money on them. So number
mm,
two, less competition, very scalable business across the board, right? Which is very important coming again from a Singaporean standpoint, because if I'm based in the United States, I don't care about these things because the market is huge, right? But if I'm
mm,
based in
mm,
Singapore, tiny Singapore, I better be worried. And from day zero, I should have a global perspective of the business. So number two, scalability, global perspective of the business, replicability, very important. So I think that sort of checks the box as well. Number
mm,
three really is that what we call again neighborhoods or LTV, right? So apart from selling cars, where can you go? Can you go into financial services? Can you go into lending? Can you get into insurance? Blah blah blah, right? So I think all said and done, that is actually very very critical and important as well.
mm,
And I think that again checks the box, because when you think about life, with selling a car once to the customers is not super interesting on a single transaction basis. But what's very interesting is, can you lend the money to the customer? Can you
mm,
finance the customer? Can you do insurance, right? And we think that the automotive space lends itself very well like this, because that was actually the reason why we didn't do properties, because in the onset I wanted to do something in properties, right? But properties
mm,
itself, it didn't lend itself very well on the third side of things, because it's almost, I would say, impossible, but it's very hard to get into all property loans, right? Property
mm,
insurance also don't pay very well, right? And then the agency of the
mm,
adjacencies of the business. I mean, I can't be hiring electricians to deal with this, right? And number two
mm,
thing about properties is that you have problems in places like Singapore, whereby restricted purchases. So as a company, as a platform, how much can you really make, right? In that sense, so it's tougher, and that's the
mm,
reason why we didn't go for property space. And to sum it up, I do think that the fundamental and most important thing, and whenever I tell and speak with entrepreneurs, is what exactly is the problem you are trying to solve, right?
mm,
What exactly are you trying to bring to this world in that sense, and what value add do you provide? I think that fundamentally underscores all businesses, right? Which is, in our case, we're trying to bring transparency, we're trying to bring trust, we're trying to bring people comfortable, make them comfortable to buy used vehicles, which is oftentimes not something that I would say people would trust. I famously asked many reporters this question. It's like, name me a used car dealer you can trust, right?
mm,
To be honest, almost zero have given me a name that they could trust, right? In that
mm.
sense, Yeah.
Hopefully they will say Carro now.
That's right. So, hopefully they would say Carro, and oftentimes we hear people talking about us as a platform they could trust. Oh, I had a good experience buying at Carro and a good experience selling at Carro. I think it takes a bit of time, but we're getting there.
Hmm. So all these like the scalability in different geographical markets, and then to add different products and verticals, you have thought about that from the get-go?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, is there anything that, as you build a company that came on later, or like you realized that, oh, that's actually not the right path to go
Yeah, I
down?
mean, there were many things that came in and about that. I think countries is one. I think yeah, there are many things, right? But I would say that, first of all, on the get go, we always thought of this as an ecosystem play. And that was the only reason why I was very interested in this business itself, right? But what are the things, for instance, that didn't really go out as planned? Like, say for instance, I actually would and should have gone into Malaysia earlier, right? I did not. In fact, we chose to go into Thailand earlier, which we neglected to realize that actually Thailand side of things is not so much a very big automotive passenger vehicle market. It's a much bigger truck market. Truck, right? Like,
Mm,
货车, right? In that sense,
mm-hmm.
the truck market is much bigger in Thailand, and that sort of taught us a lesson in that sense. While on paper, it looks like 1 million vehicles are transacted per year, in Thailand. But the truth of the matter is, the addressable market is probably 300 or 400,000 a year, because bulk of the cars, as I said, or the vehicles are
Mm.
trucks, right? Just give you an idea. So I think that's one
And
thing that we
Carro
really
doesn't
didn't.
deal
Yeah.
with deal trucks?
Oh, at that point in time, we do
And
not,
Carro
right?
doesn't deal
Yeah.
trucks?
At that point in time, we do not,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Okay.
that was again something that we learned.
Mm-mm.
One other thing that we learned also was that actually, why were we so against the idea of doing new cars? Right? So most recently, we just launched the brand with Zeekr, in that sense,
Yeah.
and that's
Mm.
our first foray into selling new cars itself. We're going to sign and launch with a few more brands coming in the coming months. But I think what's more important is this also
Yeah.
epiphany, or this idea realization suddenly that actually, you know what? It doesn't matter if I'm selling a four-wheeler, six-wheeler, eight-wheeler. It doesn't matter if I'm selling a used car, or a new car, because at the end of the day, it's the ecosystem that we are providing, right? It's this financial services, it's lending, it's
Mm.
insurance, it's warranties, it's after sales. I think this is the bulk of how we want to actually have the customer within our ecosystem, and more importantly, replicate this monetization engine in that sense across all these vehicles. So my point being, it doesn't matter new use, it doesn't matter what type of vehicles and stuff like that. And I think that's something that wasn't part of the plan initially on the get-go. But if you think about it, by and large, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, I would say 80% similar from the plan from day zero.
And now you operate in many Southeast Asian markets, and now you're going into Australia as well. For a company who has those kind of ambition to be more regional and global, what kind of lessons that can you share?
I think people is the most important thing. If you don't have the right people, don't even bother. I've tried many times going to a country whereby I didn't have a strong team or a strong person to lead that country, and going in there, I would say suicidal, but it's very tough, because in our business, it's a lot about relationship is one, but it's also not a lot about this whole understanding of the industry, knowing where to get vehicles, knowing how to sell the vehicles, knowing how to price it. And it's very prone to fraud, right? As I just said earlier, the used car dealers are not exactly the kindest bunch of people in that sense. So yeah, so I would say the first thing really, having the team, the right person in place is super important. Number two, you have to assess yourself whether or not the country makes sense, and always go in with your eyes wide open. Before I go and enter any new markets, I tend to spend a lot of time in the market myself, right? Just to understand where exactly should I open the store, how does the local market think, where's the opportunity, what is the gaps and stuff like that. So I know I recommend anybody go into any country before you go into it, rather than doing just a lot of us just tend to just do what we call desktop research, right? And even if they do go locally,
Mm-hmm.
they do not live there for a long time. It's touch and go. They go there for a day or two, and then they just leave and stuff like that. So I think that's the second thing I would do. I think the third thing that's super important before you expand the business or try to expand the business is to ask yourself, do you have a team, what we call a shared services center, right? SSC of sorts, that could deal with all this, influx of new businesses and stuff, right? So in other words, do you have a CFO team that is really ready to scale with you, right? Do you have a CMO team that's ready to scale with you? Do you have a tech team that's ready to scale with you? Because having to deal with requirements from one country is one thing, but having to deal with requirements from two, three, four, in our case, 8 countries is a whole separate discussion altogether, right? And so In other words, having that
Mm-hmm.
whole framework, process, people that can deal with, requirements, that can deal with invoices from all these countries and stuff like that, super important. So I think the third thing I would say is that having that what we call a shared service center is quite critical when you want to launch internationally. Otherwise, you're going to dig yourself into a very deep hole of cost. If finance in Malaysia and Singapore cannot deal with finance in Japan, or rather cannot deal with the invoices from Japan and stuff like that, then you have a problem because you have to hire locally, and that basically means additional headcount costs, right? In some sense. So replicability of your back office is super important.
You as a leader pay attention to, the government relationship and the geopolitics of the region when you making that kind of strategic decisions.
Yeah, so we try to stay away from politics because it's not a business. I generally believe that businessmen and politicians should stay away from each other as much as possible. So, we don't deal with that, but we do have to keep our eyes wide open for potential impacts. Like say for instance, the Trump administration, the tariffs and stuff and whatnot. The first thing we did was actually to look deep within our businesses and ask ourselves, how is this going to impact our business down the stream? Because it's not very apparent, right? Because we do a total of zero businesses with the United States, so we don't have much of an import export to talk about, in Singapore especially. So to be very frank, it has very minimal impact on us. But that said, we do think that there's a lot of downstream impact to our suppliers, right? So, for instance, our
Mm-hmm.
spare part suppliers, which could be from China, right? So I think all those guys, all said and done, would have been very severely impacted in the sense of their own P&L. So we have to ask ourselves whether
Mm-hmm.
these suppliers continue to be, okay to work with or not, right? I think that's one big question.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I tend to prefer to think about is that, okay, you know what, there is all this trade wars, terrorist wars going into these things. How can we, benefit from this? Right? I think 鹬蚌相争, we won't 得利, right? That's what I always say. So I think the long and short of this is that it's also flipping the argument and ask ourselves, where's the opportunity to do this? And I give you another very good one also in the spare parts business is that I do think this is a very good time to be in the spare parts business in this part of the
Mm-hmm.
world, right? Say for instance, setting up of a spare parts business in cars in say Malaysia makes a lot of sense, or setting up in Singapore because number one, we can export it to America, right? That's one part of things. Because the
Mm-hmm.
Chinese spare part companies now will find it very hard to
Mm-hmm.
get cars, I mean cheap parts out to the United States. Whereas for us is an opportunity, right, in some sense.
Right,
So
right.
like I said, I kind of prefer to think of it as an opportunity rather than, oh shit, what are the issues that we're
Mm-hmm.
facing right now? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Earlier, you said you are not doing business in US yet, or is it, or maybe in the future? That's also, the world's
Yeah, I
largest
again,
auto
I never
market,
like to
right?
say never. Yeah, I never like to say never,
Mm-hmm.
especially on on record, right? In that sense,
Mm-hmm.
I always say that this currently right now it's true we're not in the United States, but if anything at
Mm-hmm.
all, I would like to think that having been there for 10 years, during my studies plus my working experience and stuff and whatnot, I
Mm-hmm.
actually think that I would dare say that I understand quite a bit of the American markets, especially in the
Yeah.
East Coast and the West Coast where I used to study and I
Mm-hmm.
used to work.
Yeah.
So I have that inherent advantage if I decided to go one day back to start something or to run Carro in the United States. It's possible. Never say never.
And IPO is in on the horizon. Uh, Media reports are saying it might be a dual listing, etc. What do you think about when you think about becoming a public listed company CEO? What excites you most?
Right. I think what is the most important thing to me is not valuation, it's not investors and stuff like that. But what is the most important thing to me is the visibility to numbers when it comes to IPO, right? So what does that mean? Visibility to numbers basically means, you know what, can I say beyond a shadow of a doubt that within 12 months my EBITDA is going to be this, my revenue is going to be that, right? Is it going to be 2 billion top line? Is it going to be 100 million EBITDA? Do I have certainty? Do I have visibility? I think that to me is key when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
that. So, I was explaining to the bankers just yesterday or 2 days ago. I was explaining to him that actually it's not so much about whether I want to go for an IPO. It's more about number one, whether there is a market opening because we cannot define the market. If there's no market opening, if the market is trading very badly, it's like going out to sail in the middle of a storm, right? So nobody does that.
Yeah.
The
Mm-hmm.
other thing is also to make sure that, hey, you know what, I have enough ration, I have enough visibility. I know for a fact that, you know what, I from scaling from where I am today to wherever I'm going is
Mm-hmm.
30 days. It's not exactly going to be unknown. It's not going to be like 90 days, 100 days, or God knows how long, right? So having
Mm-hmm.
that visibility, that certainty to hitting my destination in time, super important as well, right? So come back to this. I think that's what that is most important and what's always on my head right now, which is, do I have certainty in hitting my numbers? Now, if I do, then I think anytime is a good time to get out.
Let's talk about the tech and AI. And you are always at the forefront of any technological advancement. And now, 2024, AI is the biggest buzzword, right? But actually, Carro has been implementing AI even before this hype. And how has the AI really changed your business?
Well, AI has really helped us, number one, honestly, in terms of fundraising, right? Because that really helped us differentiate ourselves from a lot of the competitors, to be very frank, right? Because most of our competitors will talk a good game. But truth of the matter is that most of them do not and probably will never have enough AI in the business to actually run it, right? But pointing at examples for us internally, we use AI in pretty much everywhere we can think about, right? So ranging from as simple as like computer vision, taking pictures of the vehicles, understanding whether there has been signs of damages, accidents, and stuff like that. Computer acoustics, right? Which is listening to the sound engine and determining again whether the car has been flooded, whether there are issues and stuff and whatnot. But more recently, I think with Gen AI, it opens us up to a whole paradigm of other possibilities that could not have been possible prior to this. Right? Let's say, for instance, people talk about 24/7 chatbots and stuff like that. To us, that's something that we've been doing like years ago. Not exactly very interesting and not exactly something that the customers finds interesting as well, right? But what we have really today is that we have augmented customer service, right? We basically in real time tell the customer service what to prompt and what to tell the customers and how to talk to that, and in real time decide on whether there's a good sentiment analysis of the course itself, and it allows us to actually better tailor our messages to the customers. More importantly, we get also to train our customer service representative to be better and better over the time, right? So that's one example of how we do it. We also try to did away, with a lot of programmers that we had in the past, a lot of product managers and stuff like that. Not because we want to do it, but simply because, to be very frank, a lot of the code today is written by AI, right? So we wrote AI to write code, for instance, right? So I think that's another thing that we've done. So all this what we call agentic workflow, agentic systems, and things like that. We do. If you think your job is safe as a CFO or as a finance person, think again, right? Because the truth of the matter is that the AI, from our perspective as well, after running tons of analysis and tons of experiments on this, is that the AI is far more accurate when it comes towards even inputting of invoices into the system, right? So today we have AIs that
Mm,
actually automatically post our books for us onto the systems itself. So increasingly, you can imagine lesser and lesser, thinner and thinner back office, lesser and lesser importance on having people to do check and balances because the AI doesn't really deviate from its cost in that sense. So
mm,
you can imagine over the long run, our back office costs, our total cost of operation should come down relatively significantly. I think that's one part of things. Secondly, I think what's even more important is that our guys are more productive. One salesman can sell today maybe 5 cars, is considered pretty good. Can we make them 50 cars? Can we make them 100 cars per salesman? That's entirely possible, and that's something that we're definitely looking at doing.
Do you have an in-house AI team, or do you work with external tech companies
Yeah.
to
So, so the
plug
bulk of
in?
the AI, I would say 90% is definitely done in-house, internally within our company. But I would say that a
Mm-hmm.
small portion of the things we definitely do partner with the tech giants, right? Like we have partnerships with say Gemini, we have partnerships with some of the big AI companies as well that you might know of. But let's just say that that's something that we constantly do, working and partnering with industry partners. And I would say this also that it does not make sense for us to do everything in the stack, right? Say for instance, does it make sense for us to do our own, train our own LLMs? The short answer is no, because A is too expensive. We're not
Yeah,
going to do that.
yeah,
Nor are we doing
yeah,
the capabilities, not the GPU to do that. But it
yeah.
makes more sense to then build on top of that. Then we have to talk to
Mm-hmm.
the LLM providers to say that, hey, maybe you should think about this. Can you do this a little bit? Can you fine tune this so that I can do this better for my sound? Can you do whatever, whatever, right? So I think all said and
Yeah.
done, a partnership is super important as well.
Early on, you talk about people is the most important. How do you attract good people and keep them around you? You mentioned that somewhere that you have 40 minus one around you. Do they like senior management? They all report to you. Is that how it works, or?
Well, I think that has changed quite a bit. One of our shareholders, Temasek, was pretty adamant that I should cut my direct reports. Right. I think a year back or 1.5 years back, right now, I've already shaved, if you may, my direct reports by half. Right. So I think now I probably have less than 20, 1 in 10
Okay.
direct
Mm-hmm.
reports into me. But what I do is that instead of everybody reporting to me, we sort of collapse functions with it. But let's just for context, right? The company has like more than about 5,000 people. So even though I do have 40 direct reports, if I do have, it's not so bad. It's actually just
Mm-hmm.
the tip of the iceberg in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But coming back to this, no, we're lesser to this. But going back to overall earlier question, how do you attract good people? I think it's about being able to sell a vision, right? I think that's super important as you do that. I think the first thing is being able to sell your vision in the company. As if people believe in the cause of transparency, of the fact that this is a tech company is doing good for the general public. Generally, I think that's part one, right? Always easy to hire people. I think number two, I would say that be nice to your employees, and also I always encourage people to come and go. Right, one of my
Mm-hmm.
investors always ask me, hey, so and so has left your company. I say, yeah, so what? Right? So and so has left my
Mm-hmm.
company, but more importantly, have you asked him or her whether he left the company on a good note? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have many instances whereby my senior managers left the company and they came back, right? After
Mm-hmm.
3 years, after 4 years. And that is very important to me because that means that these guys have been trained elsewhere. They learn other things, other skill sets that I haven't been able to give them. I think that's important. But also more
Mm-hmm.
importantly, they came back because they enjoyed working in Caro in the past and they
Mm-hmm.
want to continue to do that, right? And
Yeah.
I've seen this many times in my career, and I think that is the best kind of person that I always find out myself ended up with. People who have was in the company. After a few years, they decided that, okay, you know what, they need a change of environment, they want to
Mm-hmm.
upgrade, whatever, right? Or want to change of
Mm-hmm.
field
Yeah.
entirely. I always say let them go, it's okay, right? So
Mm-hmm.
never take it too personally. I know some CEOs that takes it very personally. They come back and say, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
never going to work with that guy ever again. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
why take it so personally? I mean, it's okay. You can't expect someone these days to stay for a job for like 10 years or even 20 years. I think that's not
Yeah. It's
good and
more
not healthy for the
motivating. Yeah.
company. So I would
Mm-hmm.
say number two thing is be nice to employees, always leave on a good note if possible. And
Mm-hmm.
always look towards hiring, people that you have sort of left the company, because those people tend to be the people that actually knows and understand the organization the best.
Recently, you have a comment saying that you want employees that's do 007. I think there was quite a lot of room for misinterpretation and misunderstanding. On Reddit, there was like so many comments like, what does that mean, 007? My understanding is like you want people who are committed, not necessarily like 24/7. And it was like a lot of
Yeah,
debate.
exactly.
Uh,
Yeah. So it was exactly that, right? So, for me, I think I was asked out of context. The reporters asked me what kind of culture do you reckon it is in Caro. And I think, I wanted to draw the analogy of aggression, right? Or people who are
yeah.
aggressive in nature in that sense, or people who are committed to doing work when push comes to shove. And so I gave the example and analogy of 007s, right? Because I think the reporter found it interesting that, the Chinese is moving away from the what we call 996, right? 996 to now
996, yeah.
007, right? Yeah, in the
Yeah.
in the past it was very famous in that sense. People were talking about, nine days, 9 a.m., 9 p.m., 6 days a week,
Yeah.
working in a company that what Alibaba is famous for culturally, right? And so to
Yeah.
me, the culture that is more interesting is 007, right? So in some sense, it's like, of course, I don't expect you to come to office 24/7 a day. Is impossible. I don't
Mm-hmm.
do that myself, and I don't expect anybody to do that. But I think what's more interesting is that when push comes to shove, when you have projects that needs you to sleep in the office and stuff like that, you jolly well do that, right? Because it's just simply put, being dedicated and being motivated to do your job and having the aggression to close the deal. I think that to me is the most important thing when it comes towards being part of the organization in that sense. It's not so much
Okay.
whether or not you put in the hours. To me, the hours is the least of my concern. I have many people in my management team that doesn't even come to office like 2, 3 days a week. Yeah.
So would you consider yourself 很卷的人，很内卷的人？
No, I wouldn't consider that because I haven't been in China for quite a bit now. I always feel that the Chinese always brings that definition to another different level. I don't think I'm very trained in that sense, right? But I,
嗯
I would like to think that we're somewhere in between. We're definitely more aggressive than the average Singaporean companies or even the
嗯
Southeast Asian companies. But I
嗯
would say compared to the Chinese entrepreneurs that I know myself personally in this part of the world, a lot of them are shareholders in us. A lot of these like multi tens of billion, $100 billion companies, CEOs or CTOs, whatever they are, all investors in us. That is a very different level of DNA when you have to compete with a billion people. For us, having compete with like 5 million people, a lot of like random small little unicorn companies and stuff like that. Our life is a lot easier, to be very frank, in this part of the world. And so I
嗯
haven't needed to get to that level yet. And I think this is also where China has a lot of regard for the Chinese entrepreneurs, and I always come to China because I always feel that there are things to learn from the Chinese
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs. And that's
One thing I noticed that is that you're very generous in sharing and your time. Like I was at two conference last week, and you were at these two conference. I saw you running out of from one panel to another panel because you had to attend the other one. I also know an anecdote that you invested in a small company. When they exited, you were so gracious. You said, they did okay. They didn't make a lot of money. Let's not take interest out of them. Let's just get our investment back. That was so class. And like, what kind of thought process did you have? Like, why do you do this kind of things?
no, it's not. I mean, it must give 取之于社会回归, right? In that sense, right? So I always believe in giving back to society, right? In that sense, what you have taken. And as an entrepreneur starting up this business when I was 13, I didn't have everything. And even in Carro itself, as a VC before that, I didn't have everything. And I think that is one thing about taking money and stuff like that, and keeping everything as if, like, what, this is my money. I don't want to share and stuff like that. I prefer to think of this as like money is a bit like, quoting one of my previous my friend, money is like fertilizer, right? You need to spread it out, make it teen, don't put too much on certain things and what certain side of the soil and stuff and whatnot. And hopefully, something good will grow out of it, right? But if you put too much money into
Mm,
that, that's an issue. If you don't put money into that, or you don't put fertilizers into that, nothing will grow out of it, so to speak, right? So in some sense,
mm,
it's about this whole thought process about giving back what you have received. And I tend to be on the side of the entrepreneur more myself, because having been an entrepreneur, having been an investor for so long in my life, I tend to
mm,
think that I don't need that additional money. Having giving back to all these guys, helping them with their
mm,
next career, next company, and stuff like that. That's what that matters more to me than it is. And going back to what I was telling you earlier about entrepreneurs, I mean about hiring, I always tend to want to hire people whom I've worked with in the past before. I also tend to
mm,
like to invest in people whom I worked with in the past before, especially people who have
mm,
failed in companies. Or doesn't matter if they sold out for not so good an exit and stuff like that. I
mm,
just, at the end of the day, like to back people like this, because I feel that those are the people who have been there, done that. They will show greater level of resilience, greater level of gumption, and they will know exactly what to avoid and stuff like that. And those kind of companies tend to go a lot faster, right? And
mm,
that's also the reason why I like to back people who are ex Rocket Internet, because they basically spend all this time, money, effort learning how to scale the business, and of course failing oftentimes. And when they come out and they start a new company again, it becomes a lot faster, and they know exactly what to do to get things done correctly, right? So I think high
mm,
level, that's what I do a lot.
Your career has been very smooth. Was there any like downturn? Was there any big, what was the worst year for you throughout
For
your
me, you're right.
career?
Generally, hasn't been that bad. I've made fairly good bets. I think most of my companies that I invested in turns out very well. In fact, I have very little, next to nothing kind of write-offs. So from an investment standpoint, I'm okay. From a Carro standpoint, we are also generally quite lucky. Company has raised about quite almost 700 million US dollars. Not many companies have done that.
Yeah.
But I would say that the only moment I can think of right now that we were sort of a bit down under was during the very early days of the setup. I think 1 year into the setup, whereby we were being sued and pursued by a local newspaper in Singapore, right? For
Mm-hmm.
lack of a better word, what they would claim as copyright infringement, which was total nonsense, right? But anyway, at that point in time, the company would have only raised quite $2-3 million. We were a very small Series A company. We had no resourcing nor time to go and fight with the lawyers, right? I think that was pretty much
Mm,
the time whereby I felt, oh man, this is terrible. This is like a bully in that sense. But I think push come to shove, we managed to resolve that issue in the end. But I think that must have been the worst situation, whereby at that point in time, having this is my first time being sued, right? And so
mm-hmm.
having the lawyers behind you and having your own lawyers basically being irritating and not refusing to back down, and suggesting that we just fight all the way. It was a whole separate discussion, whereby you have your banks draining, and then very likelihood that the company can't even survive the following day, and you have all
Mm-hmm.
this lawsuit going, summon of claims, all this media to deal with and stuff like that. I think that was a bit of a bummer. But we got out that relatively quickly, within a few months,
Mm-hmm.
and it got even stronger. We raised our Series A completely, and then that was history lah. The company effectively now became something else, but yeah, it's not too important anymore.
Who are the people that you go to when you need to strategize?
Well, I go to my shareholders a lot. I think my shareholders is a very enlightened bunch of people. I have people who, like I said earlier, I mean not ex, but current or former CEOs or C-suites of, all your BATs, right? In that sense, I have a lot of that. I have a lot of investors who are also fairly enlightened, right? So, I have Temasek, I have SoftBank, Mitsubishi, and stuff like that. So I tend to go to them a lot, especially the financial investors rather than the strategic ones. So I think
Mm,
depending on what I need, I go accordingly, right? And I think of late, I like to really engage a lot with Jardine, Second Carriage, because I think that this is a really good bunch of operators. I've not met an operator I feel personally that is as good as them. Right? And we're quite
mm,
lucky we have Wilfred, who is from Jardines, on our board as well, right? So again, something
mhm,
that we'll meet whenever I have operational issues, partnerships, questions, like for instance, the new Tika dealerships, they have done this for like hundreds of years, right? So, for me, I went to them and asked them, "Hey, what are the pitfalls? Tell me what are things I should look out for." They'll tell me exactly
mm,
things that I need to know. I think that would be an example of who I go to depending on what I need in that sense. But if I need to raise
mm,
money, if it's a very macro question, then I tend to go to the fund managers in that sense. Yeah, depending on what I need.
Aaron, would you say you're a people person?
Well, it
People,
depends on
you
who you
draw
ask.
people around
Yeah.
you, right?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask, right? To be honest. So if you ask entrepreneurs, I think they would tend to agree. If you ask my own staff, depends on who you ask. Some may agree, some may not agree. But I enjoy the company of people at times. Sometimes I do not enjoy the company of people too much. Like say for instance F1. I probably wouldn't want too many people dealing with all these people and stuff. I just want to enjoy the game. So stuff like
Hmm.
that. So I think depending on the time, would I say I'm a people person? Well, it depends. But I think yes, for the bulk of it, I wouldn't say no.
What's your hobby? Do you have something that you enjoy to do to when you're not working? I know you're quite a workaholic.
Yeah, I am programming is one. Learning. I'm doing my part-time or full-time doctorate right now. So I actually enjoy learning a lot of tech stuff and things like that. The reason why I'm in Hong Kong and Shenzhen a lot is because I'm doing my full-time doctorate degree in AI in Hong Kong Poly
Mm,
U, right? So I think that's also why I do a lot in my free time. So much so that I don't really have too much free time. So I only do a few things. So I exercise. Basically, I go out to the forest. I trek a lot, maybe 10 kilometers a day at least. I doing my doctorate, as I said earlier. I do a lot of investments, angel investments. I sit on the boards of many funds and charities and stuff.
any fun stuff?
Hiking is quite fun. I mean, just day to day is fun. I always
Mm,
tell people I'm never working, and to me every day is fun. Right now I'm having a lot of fun talking to you. Right.
thank you so much. Is there something that you would tell yourself, a 20-year-old Aaron? Any advice you would give?
Well, buy Tesla shares.
Buy
Right.
Tesla shares.
Yeah.
Yes.
And but yeah, so I think I would definitely double down on investing into a lot of these things, like the all the Meta shares, your Google shares, and all the stuff like
Or
that.
the
And
Magnificent
yeah,
Seven.
is that right? Yeah, and then or maybe sell to Cisco. No, joking. Anyway, so yeah, so what would I tell 20-year-old self? That's basically what I would do, and it's
Uh,
more from a money management standpoint because I'm actually I actually enjoy investing a lot, like be it secondary or primary markets in that sense. And one thing I've gotten to the realization of learning recently is that sometimes it's a bit of you opportunity cost in that sense, right? Say, for instance, you have $1 million locked up in a particular share, and then the share is trading sideways for a long time, and in fact, trading downwards and stuff like that. And for a lot of us, it's like I'm just gonna hold it till it goes back up, and then I'll sell once it goes back up. But actually, you're losing out on all these rising opportunities, right? Say for instance, Tesla, right? It goes up like 80% a year. You could have, sold the money, yes, absorb maybe 20% of the losses, put it into Tesla, and write up another 60%.
mhm,
This
mm,
opportunity cost at the end of the day. I think high level, that's what I would say, right? So beware of opportunity cost.
Or Bitcoin for that matter, right?
Yeah, Bitcoin works too. Yeah, funny enough,
Yeah.
when I first dealt with Bitcoins back in when I was based in the United States back then, so it was more than 10 years ago. And
How
my
much
colleague,
was it?
my colleague Puneet Chiliwala came one day and say, Aaron, oh, Bitcoin is now like a few $100s, I think $600 at some point in time. And then yeah, Puneet was basically asking me, do you want to buy some of this and stuff like that? I said, nah, I was asking Puneet, what can we use this money for? So he said, I don't know. Anyway, it's just for $600. What do you think? I was like, yeah,
Mhm,
why don't you just go for it? I mean, Puneet turned out pretty well. Anyway, I don't know how much he bought, to be very frank.
mm,
But he's he is doing well for himself. That's what I would say. Yeah. But yeah, so
yes,
Bitcoin at a point in time, more than 10 years ago, was like less than $600.
mm,
So it was a bit. demeaning, right, in that sense. Or maybe another thing that I will tell myself is that, yeah, because my fundamental investment rule has always been do not invest in things I do not know. And Bitcoin, when
Mm.
it first came out, I didn't know
You
anything about
didn't.
this. There was no fundamentals and stuff like that. Obviously, I know the
Yeah.
whole ledger system, the whole like immutable contracts, whatever, not right. But
Mm-hmm.
at that point in time, I didn't know, so I'm not going to do any investments then, right? But I think that was probably a bad call. Looking back,
Mm-hmm.
should have done something that I bought at $600 today. I probably
Yeah.
can buy a few buildings in China now.
So what would you tell people to buy now? What would you buy now if you have to put
Well, first of
your
all, I'm not
money?
an investment professional, so whatever I'm saying moving forward is not exactly investment advice. But I would say that given the rate that the Fed, I mean the Fed just cut the interest rates this morning, and looking forward, I think the Fed is signaling another 50 basis point in that sense, and that's quite significant. I
Mm,
think over a long run, over the mid run, I do generally feel that number one is I think it's good for China in general, right? So a
mm-hmm.
lot of these China dual listed stocks in the US, I think I see a lot of momentum going up, and I continue
Mm,
to see some good momentum going up, right? I think that's
mm-hmm. Mm.
one thing I would definitely do more, but just generically trading the Magnificent Seven and stuff like that, you'll be fine, right? Because of the lower interest rates, that basically means that more cash will go back to the public markets.
Mm-hmm. Were
So
you
you will see
mm,
short-term momentum.
you do talk like a stock analyst. So were you one of those kids that always wanted to win when you play any game?
Yes, I was.
Ah,
Nobody
okay,
likes
okay.
to lose,
I'm
right? Yeah,
I'm really annoyed by my husband and my children. One of my child is like that, but I guess that's a good quality to have, isn't it?
I guess so.
Aaron, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
Probably running another company. Uh, I think that is probably how I think it makes the most sense of this. I think, generically running any company for too long is not good. Even for myself, having started Carro itself, I don't imagine myself running Carro for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike some of my counterparts, my friends, they want to leave a legacy in that sense. Obviously, I want to leave a legacy, but I don't believe that this is the only company that I should run. Number one, number two, more importantly, I don't think that I think the company needs a new CEO, a new whatever, a new leader for every stage of his life in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm pretty good at getting a company from like 0 to 100, but from 100 to 1,000, you need a very different group of people that can run it. And I'm not sure whether I'm the right kind of person to run it, right? In that sense. So I think high level, I don't know. I may be still running Caro, God knows. I think there's also a possibility that I'm running another company. But one thing for sure is that I will not be retired.
Oh yeah, you're still very young, so you will
Young
be
is relative,
continue
yes. Yeah, young is
building.
relative, but yes, I will continue building even till the day I die in that sense.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you so much, Sharon. That was Aaron Tan, co-founder and CEO of Carro. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to catch more such stories every week. See you next time.